Mob Entertainment purposely sacrificed Chapter 4 for the future? Okay, let's break it down. We'll definitely find out why Chapter 4. Chapter 4 turned out crazy interesting, but yeah, definitely not perfect, and there are a ton of reasons for that. If you check out Steam reviews without actually playing the game, you might think Chapter 4 was a total disaster. And honestly, just a little bit, that's kind of true. Even though the storyline was spot on, especially with all the new lore we got in Chapter 4, the gameplay, man, it was a total mess. The first chapter dropped on October 12th, 2021, and that was an explosion. Literally, every YouTube channel was making videos on it, even though the whole playthrough took like 25 minutes max. Then, a year and a half later, we got Chapter 2, and another year and a half after that, boom, Chapter 3, which, according to many, was the most hype one so far. If you look at the pattern, every new chapter dropped a year and a half after the last one. But for some reason, they decided to push out Chapter 4 in just 1 year. And yeah, that was mistake number 1, the one that wrecked its ratings. If you played it, or even just watched it on YouTube, you probably get what I mean. Chapter 4 is clearly setting us up for something huge. And let's be real, it's the lore that saved this game from completely sinking and being the worst chapter ever. Come on, you gotta admit, we learned way more in this chapter than in all the previous ones combined. Most players were complaining about the insane amount of bugs, glitches, and just straight up broken mechanics that made it hard to really enjoy the game. If you're curious, there are tons of videos on YouTube showing all that stuff in action. And yeah, the reason for all this? Straight up lack of development time. Mob Entertainment just didn't spend enough time polishing it, and you can totally see that in the player reviews. I swear, I don't get their logic. Why the hell did they give themselves such an unrealistic deadline? Why release a half-baked game? Did they seriously not realize this was gonna backfire? So many questions, and in this video, I'm gonna break it all down. Another major issue is the whole concept of this new chapter. Mob straight up decided to focus entirely on the story, diving deep into Playtime Co's past, fleshing out the main characters. So when it came to actually working on the core gameplay, there just wasn't much time left. And you gotta understand, Mob Entertainment ain't that small indie company you first heard about anymore. They're a full-blown brand now, raking in some serious cash. And like any company that wants to go big, they gotta expand. But here's the thing. Poppy Playtime already has 4 chapters, and let's be real, it's obvious we're heading toward that one final game that's gonna wrap up this whole long and crazy journey. Mob knows this, and I'm more than sure they got a planned release schedule for their games. Something tells me they're already working on another game right now, and to keep everything on track, they probably set themselves this insane deadline for Chapter 4. But hey, that's just my theory. I also feel like Chapter 5 is going to be the final chapter, and that alone might have played a big role in all this. What if Mob kind of sacrificed Chapter 4 to make sure Chapter 5 turns out absolutely flawless? Like end Poppy Playtime on the highest note possible? What do you think about that? Looking back at Chapter 4, we gotta talk about the absolute disaster with the characters. All the new ones, except for Doughy, ended up being super weird and honestly kinda pointless from a gameplay perspective. Like Dr. Sawyer, he's supposed to be a key figure in the Playtime Co. lore, super important to the story, and with all the hype around him before the release, I was sure this computer-headed dude was gonna give us some serious trouble. But nah, he was just there, said a few lines, and then died. That's it. Yarnaby? Man, all I remember is him running around, and let's not forget, he was tied to the biggest glitch in the new chapter. You get what I mean? Nightmare Critters and Pianosaurus? Don't even get me started. These guys weren't even in the original story. They were just thrown in there for no real reason. Just to have them, I guess. And while we didn't expect much from the critters, Pianosaurus? Bruh. I'll just keep quiet on that one. I still don't get why they added him either. Like, seriously, it feels like they just decided to mess with him for no reason. And yeah, like a lot of people pointed out, his teaser was literally longer than his actual time in the game. It's pretty clear now if Sawyer and Yarnaby were supposed to be important for the story, but didn't get their backstory fleshed out, then the Nightmare Critters and Pianosaurus were just there to fill the gameplay gaps. I gotta say, I'm still happy with the game. I really like the story, but hey, that's just my opinion. There were also some super negative reviews though. This chapter drops any pretext that the developers even bothered making any half-decent gameplay. What little you actually get to do is an obvious attempt pad out playtime, so you can't refund the game under 2 hours. Not to mention the countless bugs, glitches, and straight up missing textures several patches in. This slop is strictly YouTuber bait that isn't designed to be played, just spread around to trick people out of their money. A genuine waste of time that nobody should have to pay for. Honestly, I think some of those reviews were way too emotional, and let's be real, not entirely accurate. Sure, Mob didn't perfect the game, and there's no way it should have been released in that state, but even with the bugs, there weren't that many of them, and they weren't big enough to trash the game and call it a cash grab. We still got an insane experience and some seriously cool lore, so those kinds of statements definitely need to be thought through. That being said, even though I'm defending Mob Entertainment here, releasing Chapter 4 this early was definitely a mistake. If they had dropped it like around April or May, that would have been perfect. But hey, I tried to explain why Mob might have made that call. But man, I'm so mad about Pianosaurus. They could have done so much more with him, even though he's not exactly an original character. Dr. Sawyer, that's a whole different story. I don't think it would have been that hard for such a company to develop his storyline throughout the game. His ending could have been way better than the embarrassment they gave us. Alright, let's forget about that for now. I think a lot of people are wondering how all this so-called drama affected Mob. Honestly, I think they've learned some lessons, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't change much for them. Still, they should definitely listen to player feedback. The most important thing now is that they don't repeat their own mistake with Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is going to be insane and most likely the final chapter. So its story has to be way better than Chapter 4. You get what I'm saying? Expectations are through the roof. We'll talk more about the story later, but for now, I really hope Mob Entertainment got the main message from players. Don't release a game too early. I'm even cool with waiting 2 years for Chapter 5 if it means getting the perfect finale. The last chapter has to be a benchmark for the gaming industry. The return of Huggy, Poppy escaping, the journey through the labs, all of that's awesome. But the most important takeaway was in the conversation between Poppy and the prototype. And there's this one part of their talk that indirectly points to Chapter 5 being the final game.
You have nothing now. No one. And soon, you'll have less than that.
Stop that.
You don't need to pretend anymore.
Poppy. You don't need to play at being stronger than you are.
You can
Come home.
How much do you know?
Everything.
What are you going to do with me?
I've got something special in mind.
I prepared it just for you.
And this one,
You will never want to leave.
No. No, no, no. This entire time, you've lied to me!
Only because you've kept
Missing the
point. Always been about you.
and we'll harm you.
what we are. That's not a truth that can be
But away.
Prototype. Please.
It's time to come home.
Poppy.
It's time to come home.
Based on that, and honestly, not just that, I've mentioned in my previous videos how it's been hinting at Chapter 5 being the final game. The prototype is finally going to show up, and most likely, we're going to have a survival battle with him. I'm really curious how it's going to end, who's going to come out on top, and who's going to get sent to eternal rest. Drop your theories in the comments, and I'm out for now. Catch you later. Bye-bye.